I want to talk to you about career consistency. I had the chance to meet someone very close to the Air France recruitment department, someone who was actually in that department for a long time, was a manager and is still a manager today. And this is actually a video that was shot in French, but it's useful to all of you, even if you are not going to apply for Air France because perhaps you're from another country. So anyway, we spent an hour together with this manager and he found what we do to be very interesting and shared two key points with me. First of all, the importance of preparation. Over time, pilots have had varied misconceptions of whether it was suitable or not to prepare. And that's because 20 to 25 years ago, and that's what he told me, the airlines were communicating that they would prefer for people not to prepare, to come as they are. And the reason for that is not that they didn't want people to take the selection seriously, but that there were some people who had access to preparation because perhaps they knew people who could take them to the sim, they knew a pilot, they had someone in their family that could give them access to privileged information. And then there was the rest of the population who had access to nothing, basically, because there were no companies like us, there were no preparation services that you could purchase, that you could have access to prepare. You couldn't easily prepare for psychometrics either, and so they basically they said, we would rather you didn't prepare, and they would spot it quite easily when someone over-prepared, and they didn't like that at all because it showed that they were basically not following the rules that they had set. And this belief remained over time, but meanwhile, companies like ours have come to help people to prepare. And now, he was telling me, now we expect people to prepare, of course. And personally, I always prepared extensively, which led to my success at British Airways and Emirates. So airlines, even airlines like Air France, who in the past recommended that people don't prepare, now have changed. And they understand, of course, that they want pilots who prepare for their flights. So of course, they would rather have pilots who show evidence that when they set their mind to do something, show a relevant amount of motivation. And the most obvious way to prove it is to show how you've prepared for your selection. If you've prepared with your selection actively and put everything that you could in place in order to come prepared, you're likely to do the same during your initial training, and then you're likely to do the same for your flights. You see, so it actually works well. Now, the idea when you prepare is not to modify your personality, but just to prepare, to basically try to understand what the exercise is going to be about, what the recruiters are looking for, understand the airline, understand their challenges, understand the airline pilot job. If you're a complete ab initio, to understand that as well as you can. Even if you are a student at an ATO, try to understand that again as well as you can. If you are already an experienced pilot, try to understand how different it is to work in the airline that you're targeting. All of this shows your motivation. It is evidence of your motivation. I say that a lot. People can say that they are motivated. We want evidence. What could be evidence? If you are, for instance, very young, the evidence could be that you have, for instance, done some glider work, that you've been doing some plane spotting, that you've been going at airfields to watch airplanes with your parents, that you've insisted to go to air shows. This constitutes evidence, much better than just saying it, okay? So anyway, we agreed that preparation was now important, and he said, yes, we like to understand that they've done everything they could, sure, from a young age, to show that they're interested in our airline, but also preparing. Now, this leads to the second point, which is career consistency. Okay, and if you're applying for Air France, if you're watching this video in English and you are applying for Air France perhaps as a French candidate, and you're watching this again in English, you will know how important this is to Air France. And this part is quite specific to Air France, in fact, because other airlines don't go about it in quite as intense a way, but essentially, Air France expect people to have shown to have a straight line in terms of motivation and a plan from a very young age to achieve this dream. Maybe it's not been possible to achieve this until a later stage of life, because maybe there was some lack of information at a young age, poor orientation at high school, financial problems not allowing you to pay for your training, family setbacks or family load. If you've got a family that you've got to feed, surely you've got to feed them before you can fulfill your dream, which could explain why you're now 40 and only starting this career. But there should be a path that is very clear. And so at Air France, this is really, really important. But I think that even if you're applying for other airlines, it's it would be useful for you to be able to build this because it is convincing. You know, a lot of your recruiters will have had this passion since they were children and will have had this sort of straight path. So if you're like them, it will be convincing. But not all airlines go about it in the same way. For instance, at Emirates, we had our criteria. We had like several criteria. One of them was about motivation. It was commitment and dedication to the task. And this means, again, comes down to preparation. Preparation was a concrete proof of motivation, like I have explained. But to us, someone who, well, in those days, we were hiring people who had at least 3,000 hours. So to us, someone who had gone through their training, paid their way through training and done 3,000 hours, we knew that they were already motivated. The Air France goes further by really evaluating a candidate's history, and he explained to me that to them, every past decision provides an insight into future decisions, and in the future they will be with us. An inconsistent career path can create doubts about the depth of their motivation. And we said that, I went like, wow, that's very, very interesting. I don't necessarily agree with it because at Emirates it was different, and so I have a slightly different mindset. But I understand why they would think that. It's their choice, and it's fair enough, to be honest. So some candidates are rejected simply because recruiters don't understand their motivation through lack of preparation, or through an inconsistent career path that they were not eloquent enough to be able to articulate in front of the recruiter. And if you get rejected at a selection and get told, if you get debriefed, like it is the case at Air France, and during the debriefing you get told that you are not motivated enough after you sacrifice so much of your finance, so much of your time, so much of your family commitments, it is tough. You know, it really is tough. So this is really what we're trying to avoid for you. So the idea is to justify your career path. So of course, if you just came out of high school, you went straight for your ATPL theory and then into a modular or an integrated training, well, your path is pretty straight. There's not much that went wrong there. But if your path isn't straightforward, explain things clearly. You were unaware that you could launch yourself into this career because maybe I personally had a problem with my eyes that I thought would prevent me from doing this career, and it proved to be completely wrong. And actually there was nothing wrong with my eyes. What the ophthalmologist saw when I was 8 years old, a 0.25 astigmatism, was not there when I did my class 1 later on when I was 27. But you could have basically a condition that you thought would prevent you from doing this job, and later either this condition was now cleared and okay, or you find out that actually it wasn't preventing you from doing it, or you were unaware that this path was available to you with the academic level that you had. Like I said, you had a medical condition that you thought might have disqualified you. You had a lack of financial resources, which is a good enough response. You had family responsibilities, which you had to feed your children, which means that you had to delay the time they would take you to save and to finally be able to both protect your family and engage into this career. Another reason was that recruitment was paused. For instance, between 2008 and 2018, a lot of major airlines stopped recruitment, and certainly between 2008 and 2012, there was a major sort of crisis. This could explain that you went into another area, that you studied in another area than aviation that was less subject to crisis so that you could save money for when the market would recover. You see, be convincing and prove long-term motivation that you never lost your dream. Demonstrate commitment through concrete actions, your knowledge of the job, your understanding of your target airline, your efforts as well, and your consistency in acquiring the right skills. Consistency, for instance, in, if you are going to be an airline pilot and your English is not your native language, it would be very surprising to a recruiter to find out that actually when you were 20, you went to Ireland or to England to improve an English that was extremely poor. How is that is it consistent to say that you always wanted to be an airline pilot and you can barely speak English by the time you're 18, you see? So this I would rather actually not even mention it really, because it would show choices that have not been quite consistent with the fact that your motivation was strong. Okay, everything must be coherent. Okay, so your career path must inspire confidence. Air France and most major airline pilots will have had this fire in the belly for a long time. So these Airlines value candidates with a strong passion and a logical career progression and the ability to set a plan and to stick to it in order to reach a goal. If you, for instance, went into engineering studies, instead of going straight for an integrated ATPL, you could say, well, financially it was not possible for me to do an integrated ATPL. It would have meant collecting 100,000 euros, 100,000 pounds or dollars. From the time I was 18, my family couldn't do this, so I set myself out to earn money as quickly as I could. For this, I needed to initially study. You know, I could have been a bartender for 20 years, or I could have been an engineer for 10 years. So I decided to study. I did summer jobs to pay for my training, and then I became an engineer. Hopefully, you've been an aeronautical engineer. Of course, it will play in your favor. If not, you went into another area. Some people go in finance. I've had a client, a very eloquent client, told me, I went into finance because I had an appetence for, I was competent with numbers, but I was competent with numbers that could relate to something that I could really understand well, and I am good with numbers when it comes to finance. I like statistics, and I like this sort of application. And so I went into finance. I knew as well that I would earn money very well in finance that would help me to reach my goal faster. And for me to engage into lots of algebra I knew it wasn't required as a pilot to be extremely strong in algebra. And it's true. So he was very convincing. And I went like, yeah, I like this approach. Okay. And he said, so I was able to save the 100,000 in the space of 5 or 6 years. And then I engaged into, and I waited for the market to give shoots of recovery. And then I engaged into my integrated ATPL after doing all the right calculations. This is convincing. Okay. So I hope that you got something out of this video. So the idea is show your motivation by preparing. That's immediate evidence. It's also a form of respect to the recruiter. If you invested time in them in this event, they will want to invest time in you, in training you further and having you part of their organization, okay? And then work on your career path. And if it's not clear to you yet, watch this video and then, sleep on it several nights and try to get it in your, to try and figure out in your gut what it is that got you to want to become a pilot in the first place. When did that really start? Try to find little memories of when maybe you went to an air show or when you spoke to a pilot, and try to put that into your plan and to remember in a colorful way what this actually meant to you and why you decided to become a pilot. Okay, hope this was useful to you. As always, we're here to help you. We will be putting a few links and QR codes after this video so that you can, as usual, know how we work. If you're about to engage into a selection, you want to succeed, we're here to help you out. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, to see you. And so with that, I wish you an excellent preparation for your future selection and for your career.